After a couple days off, the New Jersey Devils are back to practicing, and Sheldon Keefe spoke on the team's current identity. There's a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, College Hockey Club play announcer, Devils Writer of Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Before we get into today's episode, I first want to thank you guys, my audience, for your support the last few days. As many of you already knew, I traveled with the New Jersey Devils to cover their matchups between the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning. It was a great experience. I had the chance to attend a couple of morning skates. I conducted a one-on-one interview with both Stefan Nason and Paul Cotter, wrote a few articles for Pucks and Pitchforks, and I met up with a lot of people, including my man, Sam Wu from the Let's Go Devils podcast. And for any other people that I met while in Sunrise or Tampa Bay, you guys were awesome. It's great to see the support of the Devils discourse coming down to the Sunshine State to cheer on the Devils. It was fantastic because I wasn't anticipating a lot of Devils fans because I'm just like, yeah, I know it's Florida, but still it's like it's a little far and it's going to cost some people some money. But I'm just like, wow, there was a lot of Devils fans, especially in Tampa Bay. And I love meeting up with you guys. Without your support, without your listenership, without your viewership, there is no show. Just wanted to express my gratitude. And I also thank you guys for being somewhat patient because I haven't published an episode the last few days. I was taking a bit of a break because traveling does take a lot out of you, similar to the players. Just had to make sure I give you guys my very best. And I'm back. All right, what's on the agenda for today's episode? In the first segment, let's talk about some players that are a little dinged up for New Jersey. But on the flip side of that, let's focus on some players that got the call up, including Nolan Foote. As you guys know, I have mentioned Nolan Foote's name in a recent episode when talking about possible replacements for Curtis Lazar and Nathan Bastian. Then in the second segment, I will play a soundbite from Sheldon Keefe at a recent Devils practice. He talked about the identity of this team and how he views his team 21 games into the season. And then in the third and final segment, this was inevitable, but the Boston Bruins fired their head coach, Jim Montgomery. But here's a fun fact for you. Dating back to February 2022, 27 out of 32 NHL teams have changed their head coach at least once. There's a bit of a problem when it comes to this game of musical chairs when trying to find the right head coach for your team. I just have a few strong opinions on it, but I will save that for the third and final segment. Let's get into the Devils news. We had a Nathan Bastian sighting at a recent Devils practice. He was wearing a bubble cage, as many of you know. In the game against the Calgary Flames, he got into a bit of a tussling match with Ryan Lomberg, and Lomberg bashed Nathan's chin in. See what I did? Nathan got his chin bashed in. That's why I'm not a stand-up comedian. All right, moving on. Bastian was back to practicing, but Sheldon Keefe revealed that he still has a long ways to go before he suits up in another game for New Jersey. It's a slow grind, but it's nice to see him back on the rink. But there are also a couple other players that are dealing with an injury. Sheldon Keefe revealed that both Timo Meyer and Brett Pesce have been dealing with something the last few days. Both of them did not practice, and Timo is dealing with back spasms, and Pesce's injury hasn't been disclosed, but according to Keefe, they'll both be day to day, so it's nothing serious. But it goes to show you that the Devils' workload has been a lot the last few games. And I think it's starting to catch up to the players just a little bit because if that Tampa Bay Lightning's game was any indicator, the Devils were completely gassed. But there's a silver lining. The Devils made a couple of call ups. Obviously, Nick DeSimone and Justin Dowling were already on the Devils roster, but due to cap reasons, the Devils sent them back down. Now they called them back up, and joining them also are Shane Bowers and Nolan Foote. I'll talk about Nolan Foote momentarily because he is a player that I'm very intrigued with, but I want to go back to a point that I made in the previous episode, which is the Devils' fourth line. It consists of Curtis McDermott, Justin Dowling, and Tomas Tatar. I'm a little disappointed when it comes to the production of Tomas Tatar. I thought he would be a lot better, and I was really excited when the Devils reunited with him, but he's nowhere close to what he was during the 2022-2023 season. I get it. It was a couple years ago, but I'm just like, oh man, where was that point production? And obviously, he's not going to be put on the same line as Nico Hischier. I think those days are long gone, but I still expect just a little bit better from Tatar. Still early in the season, but a little underwhelmed. And Justin Dowling, with all the respect, he's solid, but he can't be an everyday player. But when it comes to how underwhelming the fourth line can be for New Jersey, I don't think there's a better example than Curtis McDermott. He only played in about 5 minutes in the last matchup against the Lightning. And I get that McDermott is an intimidator out there, and his job is to make sure that nobody bullies his teammates, but he cannot be an everyday player. He never has been, and he never will be. Now, if you're going up against a physical team, then insert him into the lineup. But McDermott cannot be the replacement for Nathan Bastian and Curtis Lazar. That's not going to happen. So I'm glad that the Devils are giving Bowers and Foote a chance. And the thing about Nolan Foote is the reason we didn't talk about him a lot last season is just because he was dealing with an injury that sidelined him for a good chunk of the season. He revealed that it was a lower back injury and it involved some sort of disc issue. He also revealed that he's been working really hard to try to get back into the groove, including working with a skating coach. I'm excited to see what Nolan Foote can do because the Utica Comets season has been disappointing, to say the least. They are still winless, if you can believe it. I know I don't really talk much about the Devils AHL or ECHL teams, but the Utica Comets, I might need to bring back Ben Burnell to talk about what's going wrong for them because that's a little concerning. But anyway, Foote hasn't been the issue, at least in my opinion. He has appeared in 12 games for the Comets. He has 4 goals, 5 assists for a grand total of 9 points. I think he could be a solid addition for New Jersey just to take some of the pressure off of Dowling and McDermott. You need to give yourself more options if you're Sheldon Keefe. And this is what I talked about in the prior episode. That Devils fourth line, you don't really have many options to work with if the only player that's scratched is Nick DeSimone. So getting Shane Bowers and Nolan Foote added to the roster, we'll see what happens. And obviously there's no guarantee that both those players will see any ice time. It's going to be a competition to see who deserves a crack in the lineup. But you just need to play the field a little bit if you're Sheldon Keefe, and calling up some of those guys from the AHL, I think it can definitely help them in more ways than one. Bastian is still on the LTIR. Lazar was moved to the IR. And the reason they do that is not just for cap reasons, but for roster structure. We'll see what happens, but just know I've been a fan of what Nolan Foote has been doing in the AHL, and he's been one of the few minor bright spots for what's been a very bad season so far. For the Comets, it's still early, but I'm not expecting much from Utica. All right. We're going to talk about Sheldon Keefe and what he said in terms of this team's identity. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. I've actually used Indeed before to book myself some play-by-play gigs. I use it to this very day. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support my show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right. Let's play a soundbite from a recent Devils practice in which Sheldon Keefe talked about the team's identity and how he assesses this Devils unit 21 games into the season. Take a listen.
Sheldon, 21 games in, what's the identity that you're starting to see form with this team?
I just think we've become a team that knows what's required in terms of the competitiveness and the defensive structure, the foundation to give you a chance to win each night. So we've embraced that, and I think with that now, that confidence, I think we're starting to see our pace offensively start to come together, and I think the group believes in each other, and like we're seeing lots of positive things here. The last 10-game segment there was a real strong one for us, and lots to build on there.
Okay, during this 4-day span, the Devils have had 2 off days, and they're about to have their second day of practice. I think this 4-day gap can do wonders for them, and I talked about it in the prior episode. 21 games in, the Devils have met my expectations. I think they're in a good spot for right now, but it's clear that this Devils team needed a break. They needed to reset, recharge, and refuel themselves. Because at the time's recording, they have played the most games of any team in the NHL. And recently, the Devils had 3 road games, all here in Florida, during a 6-day span. I think the Devils just needed this little bit of a break to mentally refocus. And I think you're going to see them with a sense of urgency in their next matchup against the Hurricanes, which will be tomorrow when this episode goes live. But 21 games in, I think the Devils are in a pretty decent spot. But similar to what Jacob Markstrom told me is that teams are starting to catch up to you. So you got to try to rack up the points as much as you can. And now, when it comes to team identity, this is going to be fun for me because I love looking at the Devils up and down their roster because, like I said, they've met my expectations for the most part. But to be fair, some players have exceeded my expectations, including Paul Cotter, Stefan Nason, Jonathan Kovacevic. They add a new dynamic to this team. When I assess this Devils unit compared to last year, they are not the same team. I think there's a lot of optimism surrounding the Devils discourse. And I think once they all settle on down, I think come mid-season, this team could be very dangerous. And similar to what Stefan Nason told me, this team does not want to hit their peak until we're towards the end of the season heading into the playoffs. So that way they can play their very best heading into the postseason. And I agree with them. Up and down this roster from an offensive standpoint, a defensive standpoint, and a goaltending standpoint, this Devils team has improved in more ways than one. When it comes to offense, they're not so top heavy. Yes, I talked about the 4th line in the first segment, but that 3rd line is very intriguing. And that is because of Paul Cotter and Eric Halla. Obviously, Stefan Nason was brought up to the Nico Hischier line, but he was with those guys for a good chunk of the season up to this point. And I think all three of those guys deserve credit in more ways than one as to how they've been able to elevate the Devils from an offensive standpoint, because as we all know, it took a minute for Jack Hughes to get himself going. And when looking at the Devils' star players, Jack Hughes, as I said in a recent episode, he has arrived. Jesper Bratt is showing everyone that his all-star campaign from last season was not a fluke. Nico Hischier has a legitimate chance to become a Selke Trophy winner, if not a finalist at least. Up and down the lineup from an offensive standpoint, I've been rather impressed. Defense, more or less the same. Jonathan Kovacevic, I think he's been really good. Jonas Siegenthaler, he's been really good. Luke Hughes, points not really there, but he's improved his defense. Same with Brett Pesce. That's exactly what I like to see from the Devils when it comes to defense. Dougie Hamilton, he does not focus on defense whatsoever. In fact, he's a turnover machine. But the one thing I could say about Dougie is that he makes up for it when it comes to points and goaltending. I don't care what anybody says. The Devils' goaltending has, in fact, improved. Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen, they passed the eye test. And I remember talking to Matt Loughlin and Chico Resch about this a couple days ago, and they agree with me. Sometimes you just can't look at the stats in this sort of aspect. But I think the big thing from this Devils team is their physicality. Dylan, Bratt, and Nason have told me that they are really proud with how physical this Devils team is. Because last year, you could hit Nico Hischier or Jack Hughes and face little to no repercussion. Not the case this time around. You got big guys like Curtis McDermott, Brendan Dillon, Stefan Nason, Paul Cotter, guys who are not afraid to throw their weight around and maybe when the time comes, drop the mitts and get into your grill. And Ken Danico actually told me this recently, which is when it comes to fighting, it's more strategic, similar to what Brendan Dillon did in the first game against the Panthers when it seemed like the Panthers were regaining momentum. He dropped the mitts and went toe-to-toe with Jonah Gadjevich. That was a strategic fight to give his team more energy. He wasn't just fighting just to fight. And I think that's what we need to take into consideration. So when I assess this team's identity, yes, we could talk about offense. We could talk about defense. We could talk about goaltending. But honestly, I'm really proud with how physical this Devils team has played. And I think that's my big takeaway 21 games into the season, which is this team is way more physical. And if they make the playoffs, well, a lot can happen. I'm knock on wood. Physicality is going to be important, especially in a 7-game series. If you're going up against the Hurricanes, they're not going to take it easy on you. The Devils know this from a couple seasons ago. Physicality will be imperative, and I'm glad that they are a lot tougher. All right. I'm going to tell you guys my thoughts on the coaching situations happening throughout the NHL. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Prize Picks. I've actually used Prize Picks before during the basketball season. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on the sports action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Okay, to wrap up today's show, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent. And forgive me, I don't know how many of you will actually care, but I need to get this off my chest. Jim Montgomery was recently fired by the Boston Bruins. It was the worst kept secret in the NHL. The Bruins losing badly at home against the Columbus Blue Jackets was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was just like, yep, he needs to get out of here. Dating back to February 2022, 27 out of 32 NHL teams have changed their head coach at least once, including the Devils. Obviously, you got people like John Cooper. He's been with the Tampa Bay Lightning since 2013. Mike Sullivan, who might also be on the hot seat, he's been with the Penguins since 2015. He's won a few Stanley Cups. Bednar, he's been with the Avalanche since 2016. Brind'Amour, he's been with the Hurricanes since 2018. Andre has been with the Coyotes / Utah since 2021. Those are your longest tenured coaches in the NHL. And the fact that 27 out of 32 teams have changed their coach at least once, including the reigning champion Florida Panthers, before them, the Vegas Golden Knights. I just need to get this off my chest. Look, not every team situation is the same. And I saw a few people debating this on social media when it comes to the Bruins roster structure. It seems like the Bruins are going to sell. It seems like they're nearing the end when it comes to their current structure. Obviously, it's just a rumor, but we'll see what happens. But people were saying, like, the Bruins roster is not really all that good. So what do you expect out of Montgomery? And it sort of takes me back to the Lindy Ruff era last season. The three finalists for the Jack Adams Trophy from a couple seasons ago, Lindy Ruff, Dave Haxtell, and Jim Montgomery, all three of them were fired by their respective team that they were coaching for at the time. Lindy Ruff, the Devils, Montgomery now with the Bruins, and Haxtell with the Kraken. That is just incredible. Those three finalists for Coach of the Year were fired. Like, yeah, I agree with some people. Like, what do you expect Montgomery to do with that Bruins roster? And even then, the next person in line, do you really expect for the Bruins to really turn it around? Because I speak from experience. The Devils fired Lindy Ruff last season, named Travis Green the interim head coach. What changed? Nothing really. So my thing is, like, when I think of Lindy Ruff and his era, I think, and I might be alone in all this, I think Lindy was given too much hate. And here's why. Some of the seasons in which he was behind the bench, the Devils were injured, including last season. The Devils dealt with a decent amount of injuries from Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Dougie Hamilton. It became a recurring joke that the Devils could not stay healthy. So what do you expect Lindy Ruff to do when his roster is never healthy? We saw what can happen when his team is fully healthy. They had a historic season. That doesn't just happen. Like I said, I might be alone in all this, but I'm a little frustrated when someone's coaching a team for like 3 years and they get the can because things aren't really going all that well. I'm just like, you need to build some sort of structure, some sort of foundation. Now, like I said, not every team situation is the same, but I really hope that Sheldon Keefe is the Devils head coach for the next 3 seasons through thick, thin, and thinner. 3 to 4 seasons in that span, because I need to see the Devils core in Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt. They need to find a consistent voice. And you cannot keep changing the head coach and then saying, okay, yeah, let's do this, because then they're going to have to learn a different system, and everyone's strengths are different. Everyone has different weaknesses. That's way easier said than done. And similar to what Christy Flannery of the Hockey News has told me, when you fire a head coach, sometimes it gives you the idea that a big change just happened, when in reality, they're just going to name someone as the interim head coach and nothing's really going to change, because you can't really change a system midway through the year and expect some sort of miracle. Now, you're going to bring up the Oilers, and I get it, but similar to what Chico told me, the Oilers, they have a lot of good players, including Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Come on now. They are an exception. I get it. They made a coaching change, and they went on a 16-game winning streak, but how often do you see that? Be honest with yourself. Just saying. So like I said, I just think coaches get the short end of the stick, and it's one of the reasons why I would never be a coach, because it's just like they are the last ones to be given credit when things are going well, and when things are going wrong, they're the first ones to be blamed. I would like to see some longer tenured coaches with the same team, similar to what you might see in the NBA or the NFL, MLB. Anyway, tangent over. Leave your thoughts down below. Let me know what you guys think of some of the Devils' injury situations. What's this team's identity? And please spark a debate when it comes to head coaches in the NHL and their tenure. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.